I'm Dr. Brad Hafford, archaeologist and economic anthropologist. Welcome to Note Nook, where I take a close look at a banknote from the relatively recent past. In each episode, I pay close attention to one banknote example that's no longer in circulation. I'm not talking about value of a note to a collector, but rather about the information the note carries about the issuer and the users through the symbols and the text on it. As an anthropologist, I'm more interested in what money says than what it's worth, and it says a great deal. Today, we look at a 10-mark note issued in 1971 in East Germany called the Deutsche Demokratische Republik, or DDR. We begin by looking at the obverse, or front of the note. This side typically emphasizes the issuing authority and often carries an image of an important person from the country. The important person in this case is Clara Zetkin, labeled beneath in case we don't recognize her. And most people today probably wouldn't recognize her. But most people in East Germany at the time would, despite the fact that she died nearly 40 years before this note was issued. Many East German cities had a street named for her, and in 1967, a statue of her was erected in Leipzig, where she was educated. She's sometimes called the grandmother of German communism, and so her appearance on a banknote of the communist German Democratic Republic makes sense. Although the communist ideals of the Soviet bloc ultimately proved ineffective or collapsed under poor execution, many of the ideas that Zetkin fought for remain of utmost importance. We still strive for gender equality, for example, and that was her main push. In fact, she was a foundational figure in equal rights for women. She helped to establish International Women's Day, first celebrated in 1911. It was socialist in its roots because the way Zetkin saw it, only through political and socio-economic reforms would working-class women be heard, benefiting all women and men alike. Women deserve to be able to work at the same jobs as men and to receive equal pay. Long a member of the Socialist Workers' Party, later the Social Democrats, she campaigned against the First World War. After the war, she entered the parliament of the new Weimar Republic as co-founder of the Communist Party of Germany. As the most senior member in 1932, she gave the opening speech at the Reichstag, in which she spoke out against fascism and the rising National Socialist Party. It came to power the very next year, however, and banned the Communist Party. Zetkin went into exile in Russia, where she died soon after, aged 76. Her long association with communism and the workers' angle in which she viewed women's rights made Clara Zetkin perfect for an East German note. The image is of her as an older woman, around the time that she was making her strong stand against fascism, and it highlights her designation as the grandmother of German communism. At the left of the note, we see more emblems of workers and communism in the state symbol of the DDR. It is a wreath of grain, encircling a hammer and compass. The tools represent work or industry and planning, while the surrounding grain represents farming and agriculture. These were seen as the core efforts to keep the state functioning. Just to the right of this, at the top center of the note, we have the issuing bank, the Staatsbank der DDR. The value, 10 Mark der Deutsche Demokratische Republik, which is 10 East German marks, and the year of issuance, 1971. The background in this area is an elaborate curvilinear kaleidoscope of lines in orange, pink, and brown, with slight tinges of green. There's also a complicated brown geometric line across the bottom of the note that runs behind the large number 10 at left and contains a smaller 10 at right. The design is complex to deter counterfeiting. Another element to deter counterfeit is the watermark. Many banknotes contain a watermark, usually in an otherwise blank area of paper where the thickness of the note has been manipulated to embed an image within. When viewed with a strong backlight, the image becomes visible. In this case, we see the portrait of Clara Zetkin once more, though without much detail. Detailed embedded images are hard to achieve, but any watermark adds a level of difficulty that simple copies of notes on normal paper can't duplicate. Now let's look at the reverse. The back of a note often emphasizes the laws that authorize or protect it, And at the very top of this note, we see a line of German text that states that those who make or use false banknotes will be punished. It doesn't tell us what the punishment will be or what particular law covers the crime, but the statement alone was thought to be enough to deter counterfeiters. More curvilinear, futuristic, wave-like designs are seen surrounding the DDR symbol, and this time the symbol is larger and clearer so that we can see more wave designs behind the hammer and the compass as well. Colors continue in pink, brown, orange, and green, but the primary background of the reverse overall is made of straight vertical lines in these colors. Again, there's a brown bar at the bottom of the note with the denomination in numerals and spelled out in German. And the background of this bar is curvilinear and crosses many other lines, almost creating an illusion of movement through waveforms. The intertwined waves, perhaps intended to resemble those emitted by radio or radar or radiation, may be intentional, as the primary reverse image relates to science. It shows an engineer at a control panel of a nuclear power plant. This image also relates to the primary theme of gender equality, as the engineer in question is female. The DDR wanted to show the equality of its workforce on the banknote honoring Clara Zetkin. In this case, the work might be considered middle class, however, and Zetkin specifically wanted to address working class issues, despite being from a middle class background herself. But on the note, East Germany wanted to show that it employed women in more scientific jobs as well. Physically, it's a small note, measuring only 12 centimeters across, and it's rather flimsy. It was one of the lowest denominations issued, and this one obviously circulated a great deal, as it shows heavy folds and tears. At the time, 5 East German marks could be obtained for 1 West German mark, and there were about 3.5 West German marks to the US dollar, making 10 East German marks worth, in 1971, about 57 US cents. So what does this note tell us about East Germany in 1971, and how does that compare with what we know from history? East Germany as a country officially formed in 1949 and embraced the classless ideals of communism. In its foundational constitution, it stated directly, men and women are equal. They have the same rights in all spheres of society. There were certainly problems in administration, but many of the working class or proletariat issues were addressed, and by the 1960s, nearly 50% of the DDR workforce was made up of women, one of the highest female employment rates in the world. By 1989, 87% of East German women of working age had received occupational training, and 91% were employed. According to the ideal, emancipation of women was connected to emancipation of the working class, and by that ideal, it had been achieved in the DDR. But had it? Studies have shown that women still tended to work primarily in certain industries and services, the middle to low income jobs, such as education, healthcare, social services, and textile work. And they tended actually to be paid less, earning about 76% of male salaries. Still, women contributed about 40% to the average family's total income, whereas in West Germany that number was only 18%. Socialist ideology also made it a state responsibility to look after mothers. The DDR issued many special dispensations for mothers, but many of the special laws meant to protect mothers also reinforced the traditional role of women, even banning them from working jobs that the state considered to be too dangerous. In the 1970s and 80s, East German women began to see that the state definition of emancipation was not complete, and although they made up half the workforce, they were not truly equal. Furthermore, society as a whole was intensely watched and carefully controlled. The Staatssicherheit, secret police, or Stasi, kept an eye on the people and encouraged citizens to inform on each other. Meanwhile, the people did not have freedom of travel, expression, or even participation in the political process, and many lost their lives attempting to flee into West Germany. The idea that so many would rather face the dangers of fleeing than stay in the closed society points to severe internal state problems. Furthermore, the 5-year plans that the DDR made for its economy often fell short. Economic decline resulted, and it became more and more difficult to supply the workers in a state-controlled environment. Equal pay doesn't mean much when there's little to buy in the shops. Some people today have expressed a kind of nostalgia for the cradle-to-grave protections afforded by an idealized socialist state, and they imagine that that was what they had in East Germany. In fact, there were some good ideas there, but there must be a better way to attain them than through a totalitarian government. I hope you enjoyed looking at this banknote with me. I'm Dr. Brad Hafford. Join me again next time on Note Nook, part of my series, Money Talks.